Welcome everyone to this episode of Manufacturing Talk Radio. I'm Tim Grady. I'm here with my co-host Lew Weiss. We have two of our senior international correspondents in studio with us today. We're very excited to introduce to you Mr. Royce Lowe. He is from Europe, the UK. Right?
Hi.
And we have Mr. Chong Wang, who is from China. He is our correspondent over there.
Yes, hi.
Glad to have you with us, Chong.
Thank you.
Lew, we're going to talk about some of the global issues that are going on. We're going to talk about what's happening with Manufacturing Talk Radio and the new shows that we're developing, and maybe a little bit about what 2019 looks like.
Well, we're going to take a talk about our new shows at the end. We'll have everybody hanging on the seat of their
edge of their
chairs, right. So why don't we start off talking about this trade war that we seem to have going on. They seem to be talking now about perhaps next week when China comes to Washington that they may have something to talk about.
Yes.
Chung, is there any truth to that?
Yeah, of course. According to the information, of course, there's no detailed information anywhere in the media. I believe that's the situation here as well. But they have been talking, and judging from the high-level talks, that China is actually adding more people to their delegation, and so probably making progress.
The fact that China is coming here, is that any indication that they are perhaps suffering as a result of Mr. Trump's tariff war?
I would say the suffering probably have not seriously begun yet, but they are definitely coming. And because that the U.S. is China's biggest trading partner, 20% of all exports come to the U.S. But last year, despite the trade war, actually U.S.-China trade had a really good year. There was a 10% increase in bilateral trade. And
whose number is this? Mr. Trump's? Or?
Yeah, who would have guessed that?
That's a China number. According to Trump, the number should be worse. So there's an 11% increase in China exports to the U.S. In fact, the deficit last year, according to China numbers, I'm talking RMB numbers, not U.S. dollar numbers, and that doesn't include any trade that goes on to a third port or for further processing and later enters the U.S. So that, according to those numbers, the U.S. trade deficit with China has increased by 17% in the last year, while China's trade surplus to the world has decreased by 15%.
So there's still a little ahead by a smidge.
No, there's actually 30% difference.
Yes,
because China's buying more, but not from the U.S.
Yes, right. So, Lew and I have wondered, Royce, and now that you're here instead of across the pond, has there been any impact in Europe in all of this tariff stuff going on?
Yeah, there has, particularly as regards if we look at steel, for example, where Trump put a 25% tariff on steel. What happened was that the countries that would normally export to the U.S. Because of the 25%, diverted the steel to Europe. So Europe saw a huge increase in the amount of steel that it imported. The prices went down because there was a glut of steel, and they're not terribly happy about this. In fact, the actual exports from these other countries went up to the US, went up like, not to the US but to Europe, went up like crazy, and so that's caused a little bit of havoc in Europe. That's steel. As far as the automotive end of it goes, the threat from Trump was to put 25% on the automobiles from Europe, but at the moment they sort of eased off and said that negotiations are going on, and we don't really know. They're going to make some kind of decision in mid-February. as to whether or not they're going to put an extra tariff on automobiles, which doesn't really make sense that they would put, certainly wouldn't put 25% on it. Apparently, if they do put this kind of tariff on automobiles, it's going to increase the cost of an automobile by about $6,000.
Yeah,
which is bad for certainly bad for the consumer.
Yeah, they won't sell a lot of those. So.
Exactly.
Well, frankly, the whole thing is stupid. You know, the tariff wars never proved to be of any great value. Trump is talking about March 1 putting another 15% on top of the existing Chinese steel tariffs, and the only thing that did really was, in the U.S. steel industry, they raised their prices by 35–40%.
Yeah.
And so now we have a bit of a glut. So now the U.S. steel prices now are going down.
Yeah.
So it's a whole crazy mess, unnecessary, and frankly, I don't think it's going to accomplish anything.
Well, yeah, apparently the steel price in the U.S. since it was at its peak in June, July last year has dropped by about $200 per metric ton. So that's what's going on that end. As far as the aluminum goes, the U.S. doesn't have a great big aluminum industry, but and Europe's really not that big a player in aluminum. It's mostly China and Canada that are the big suppliers there.
Well, we'll see what goes on. I know that former presidents and their administrations grappled with this issue. They tried to work through the World Trade Organization. There are policies in place to file a complaint with the WTO, to adjudicate it. It tends to be a very long and laborious process. It was not going to resolve. Trump got tired of it. He completely nixed going that direction, violating all of those agreements that are in place. Went with the tariff issue. He's trying to open up China markets to more U.S. goods going over there, but we talked with a couple of our other senior correspondents about that issue. Can you really balance of trade? And the answer is no, because our economy is so big. It's it's the largest in the world. So if we could balance with China, then their economy is probably a $20 trillion a year economy also. So that may not happen for a decade or so.
Well, speaking about balancing the balance of payments and all of that, XM Bank is still swinging out in the wind. There now is beginning to be some heavy pressure to approve a group of individuals to come in so that they can have their quorum.
Right.
The XM Bank over the last 8 years has produced 1.5 million jobs in the United States. That's probably more jobs than Mr. Trump introduced into this country. And it's hurting our country that we don't have the XM Bank. And it's something like $8 million a year they're losing as a result of XM Bank not being fully quorumed.
Probably billions.
Billions.
I think the whole nuclear industry is in the right mind to say that by not having the Export-Import Bank in play in the U.S., virtually guarantees that every nuclear reactor built in the world will be designed and built by Russia. Think Chernobyl. Not a good thing.
I understand they're going to make that a tourist spot now.
That'll be interesting. Now that they have actually moved the building over the building and encased it. And now they're going to actually try to tear it down on the inside with robotics. That'll be fascinating to watch.
It's terribly it's terribly expensive and it's terribly time consuming. I mean, to build a nuclear reactor, they're talking about building them in the UK, and I think EDF, the French company, is involved. I think there's Chinese money in there too. As far as I know, it's still on.
Yes, right.
These things tend to be on and off, on and off, on and off. But they're talking like 20 years before it's operational, and zillions of billions of dollars. So.
They're trying to do one in the state of Georgia in the United States, and they're having all kinds of issues. And they've now predicted that by the time they get it done, and they've put billions into it, it will be obsolete because wind power and solar power will be cheaper and better to install.
Yeah.
And they're still trying to recover from the fact that Atlanta was burned down by the North during the 1865 war, the Civil War. So it could take longer than 20 years.
Who knows? Who knows? Okay. So, Chong, you were going to comment on balance of trade issues with China?
Yes, I wanted to say that the trade deficit that we're looking at now, both from the China side and the US side, does not include some other portions, other components, like trade is currently only physical goods getting traded, being shipped over into the border, but there is also trade in services. And financial services and other services. And returns on investment, U.S. companies' investments in China are currently not calculated. But actually, the returns over in China, a lot of it is owned by U.S. companies as well.
So that kind of covers tariffs, and how we're chatting about them at the moment. But then there's another issue that we keep hearing about. That is Brexit. We just, recently they had a vote in Parliament on Brexit. I love watching Parliament. I'm convinced it could be like a rowdy hockey football game if they had hot dogs and beer served in Parliament, and they could toss them at each other. They do that at lunchtime anyway. Royce, it looks like it could be a hard Brexit at this point if the UK goes out. What's the impact?
It could be a hard Brexit, but a hard Brexit would be an actual disaster. Just on a simple logistical level, there are something like 10,000 trucks a day that leave the UK for the continent of Europe. And they just leave and they drive and they go across the water and they get off at the other end, and that's it. A hard Brexit would mean that every one of those trucks, there would have to be something written. It doesn't matter how short that piece of writing is, it's going to take. The truck has to stop, the truck has to stop, the truck has to stop. And it will be chaos. They've already pinpointed old airfields, for example, in Britain, that in the event of hard Brexit, where can they park the trucks while they're waiting to go across the channel? And they're also saying that 1 in 6 people are either already doing it or intending to stockpile. In other words, they're going to go and raid the supermarkets and the pharmacies, and they're going to stockpile food and medicine. Now, you say 1 in 6 people. When you say that quickly, it doesn't seem like many, but there are 60 million people involved in this thing. So that's like 10 million people are either doing this or intending to stockpile. And these are the worst scenarios. I think what's actually happened is that the thing about the Irish border, for example, in other words, they want to make sure that there is no hard border between Northern Ireland, which is part of the UK, and the Republic of Ireland, which is of course part of Europe. They cannot envisage, for example, the same kind of thing. If they have a hard border, then again you're going to get paperwork and all the rest of it, and they figure this will cause chaos and friction and everything like this. The Brexit, they're supposed to leave at the end of March. This could be extended. It could be extended for months. and it probably will be. I don't think Europe wants the UK to leave. There may be a couple of countries for some strange reason that want them to leave, but I think grosso modo they don't want the UK to leave the European Union. It's going to be terribly inefficient, and it's going to be a nuisance for everybody. So somewhere there has to be room for negotiation, and the problem being, of course, that the Conservative Party has a bunch of 100 and odd people who voted against this deal anyway, and then you've got the real extreme right, the old sort of empire lovers, the ones that think that really nothing's changed since the 19th century, and for that simple reason they don't want they want Brexit.
Right.
These were the guys that started Brexit. These were the guys that lied about what was going to happen with Brexit, and a lot of the public swallowed it.
Right.
So really, I mean, if somebody came to me and asked me to talk about Brexit, I say, well, where do you want to start, and how much time have you got? And I don't know what's happening, and I don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
And I don't think at the moment that anybody really does know what's going to happen. It's unfortunate, but that's the way it is, and it's sort of wait and see. She has a plan B. She'll be talking to Europe. She'll be talking to Barnier, and there will be further discussion. And the Labour Party's been involved. She just survived a vote of no confidence after the defeat of the Brexit deal. So it's a question of watch this space.
We'll see what happens.
You know, and we'll see what happens.
Chong,
Yes.
Does China watch this at all with any interest? Does it have any impact on them, either by the UK or the EU?
Absolutely, absolutely. Actually, although China officially has been relatively quiet on the issue, but Brexit actually affects China to a great deal, because China is a trading partner to the world, exports, probably the largest export trading partner in the world, and Britain is one of its closest partners in the EU in terms of investments, in terms of industrial back and forth, including that nuclear power plant. It's not only Chinese money is involved, but I think Chinese money was involved as a requirement for the Chinese company to bid and to supply some components for that potential nuclear power plant. And but also, being that UK is a financial center of the world, the UK already has an agreement with China to provide financial services to China in many sectors. So UK was really an important factor in dealing with Europe, in getting into the doors of the European market.
Interesting. Lew, you've watched this a bit. What's your take on Brexit?
Well, I know many Brits, and the ones I know are clearly not in favor of it. They were happy to be gone, or theoretically gone. But I think that you're right. There was a lot of misinformation when this whole thing was developed and came out, and I think you used the word lie, which is a common word here in the United States. And so the people were lied to. They didn't know what they were voting for. Personally, I think seeing a united Europe is much like a United States. I think there's many benefits, for the entire continent, and all in all, in the end, they may wind up having it back again.
They may.
I would agree, Lew, that there's probably not going to be an exit of the UK from the EU.
Yeah, probably.
I think they're just going to give up on trying to get an exit agreement and say it makes more sense to stay, and that's the way we'll go.
A recent poll said that if they were asked the question now, something like 47% would say stay,
Right.
33% would say leave, and so many percent would say, I don't know. Right. So it's changed quite a lot.
I think those that don't know are the ones that should be running the government.
Well, and the interesting use of the word lie does appear in American politics and has for some time right across the board. It's tragic. You and I have talked about it at length. The politicians just don't tell the truth, and they haven't for decades, but it's getting so much worse. So much worse.
I have no comment.
Or Lew will go off on a tear.
Yes, I don't want to lose 50% of our listeners, and I don't want to say which 50%.
Well, let's talk about the 100% we're going after with new shows.
That's a great idea. For those of you who don't know our beginnings, so I'll give you the 2-minute elevator pitch of Manufacturing Talk Radio, which is now 5 years in the making and in development. And we've had just short of 1 million downloads of our episodes, and we're now expanding. We have Women in Manufacturing, as Women and A-N-D Manufacturing.com. And last week we just started our 3rd podcast, Manufacturing Matters, with Cliff Waldman. I don't have his whole title at the tip of my tongue, but he is an economist. And in spite of the fact that he's an economist, he's very good. And he really knows his stuff. And we've got actually 8 or 9 other shows in development. And we're going to be launching these shows over the next 2 months. And it's all about manufacturing, women, men, kids, education, everything having to do with manufacturing. We were told when we first started doing this 5 years ago that only 12% of our economy was manufacturing. Well, that's not really true. It's somewhere around 30, 33%, considering the upstream and downstream of where manufacturing fits in many other business sectors. So it's a significant portion of our economy, and Tim and I are having fun, and we're getting other people involved with it, and countries, China, England. I broadcasted from Brazil when I went on the road. So we're making a name for ourselves to get the word out to manufacturing people, get them information that they might not ordinarily get. So that's the fun part of what we're doing.
We're certainly expanding, Lew. We encourage everyone to go to mfgtalkradio.com. That's where you will see Manufacturing Talk Radio. You'll see the Cliff Waldman Show, Where's Willie, with Willie Miller will be on that channel. Women in Manufacturing will have the Wham show that it has now. There'll be a couple of other new shows coming onto that channel, all under the umbrella of MBC. So we hope that you'll come and visit us often. We post up news, we put up podcasts, lots of information for the manufacturing industry. Lew, it's been a lot of fun, a lot of great info.
I just want to bring up one point, and I know that we don't like talking politics and we don't like talking religion, sex, and money. But we've been self-funding this show now for 5 years. We are putting out a media kit. We are accepting donations. We are putting out the media kit for advertisers who could advertise on shows. They can advertise on our metals and manufacturing Outlook e-zine, which comes out every month. So we've got a lot of product to offer a manufacturer to advertise to other manufacturing groups, and we take checks and credit cards, and you're welcome to join us.
Yes, it's a very targeted, tight industry, so we put out very targeted, tight products. Again, thanks for listening today. We appreciate you joining us on Manufacturing Talk Radio, and you will see more videos in the very near future. Thanks again for being with us today.